Hello YouTube. Before we start this video, I wanted to say a big thank you to anyone who subscribed or donated to my Ko-fi page. In not even 10 hours, we had reached enough memberships to make sure that now I do not have to worry about stopping YouTube anymore, and that is a huge relief. This can now become my second job, which is something that I've been doing for the past few months now, and it's great because it's what I love. So we get to continue with the videos with nothing changing. I won't have to monetize, take sponsors. I won't have to show the Ko-fi page. We are good, and that is entirely thanks to you. So, that being said, let us move on to today's topic. We are continuing with another episode of the Lifter Profile series with a man that was highly requested, Bold Omni-Man, aka Paris Butler. I know that you guys have been expecting him in this series, and he's someone that I personally like a lot as well, so I'm very happy to make this episode today. So, as you know, the video will be split into 3 parts. In the first part, we're going to review his training. I'm going to look exactly at what he does personally, and we're going to discuss it. I'm going to critique the way he approaches his split. Then we're going to take a deep look into his training philosophy. What can we learn from him? What are the core principles of his training method? And then the last part, the one that you guys were waiting for, the physique critique. I'm going to look at every single one of his muscles, and I'm going to give them a grade from A to D. We're also going to discuss how he got certain muscles big and why he might or might not have certain weak points. Before we start with the program review, a big shout out to Paris. He sent me his entire program clean. He sent me all of the footage. So essentially, il a pré-mâché le travail. As we say in French, he did half of the work for me. So that makes it very easy for me to make this video. So thank you, Paris. All right, program review. So if you know Paris, if you're subscribed to his page, I hope you are subscribed to his page, he runs something known as the Physique method. The Physique method is a self-coaching training method that highlights a bunch of principles that if you follow, you are going to get bigger, you are going to get stronger. There is no way around that. And what I like a lot about this particular method is that it's highly flexible. You know, there's nothing worse than these training programs that are set in stone, that are almost like religions, where if you don't follow the rep range exactly, or you remove like one lift from the program, it falls apart and then it's your fault. Like, oh yeah, you removed one piece of the stone from the pyramid and now it stops working. If a program stops working, if you slash one exercise or remove one rep range, guess what? It's a shit program. The Physique method is not that. It allows you to pick your lifts and it allows you to make your own split. And on top of that, it's free. For some reason, the natural community on this platform has an aversion for money. So you can actually access the Physique method for free on his page. It's an entire lecture. It is amazing. Paris, if you want to post it in the comments, I will pin it for you if YouTube allows us. If not, just go look it up. And the way he adapts this method to his own personal training is he does a 5-day split and he runs it within a period of 10 to 11 days. So that's interesting as well. It's not 5 days back to back to back. It's 5 days, and within 10 days, he has to do his 5 days. So if you can do math, this means that he trains 48 hours. Most likely he will do 1 day of training, 1 day of rest, 1 day of training, 1 day of rest, etc. But it's not set in stone. This is an advanced practice and one that I encourage you guys to try if you have some experience. Instead of saying, okay, Sunday is my rest day, like I used to do, instead, let the rest days float around and take them when needed. It might be that sometimes you're going to get your rest day and you're not tired, so why take a rest day? And sometimes you're going to do 2 days of heavy lifting and you'll be pooped. Now you have to take a rest day because if you don't, you're not going to be efficient in the gym. That's exactly what he does. That is quite smart. I say only for advanced people because I believe that someone who is more of a novice needs more structure. And if you start giving novices too much freedom, they do random things. Freedom is important to learn how to program a split for yourself. But at the start, something that forces you to train on Monday, Wednesday, Friday tends to be better. The more advanced you are, the more freedom you get. It's also true because if you're a novice, most likely you won't need that much work. So the necessity to take a rest day, an impromptu rest day, won't be that high. But for someone like him, who is very strong and also does a shit ton of volume, it makes a ton of sense. Then you also add the fact that he runs a full body split. Good luck doing a full body split every single day with a lot of volume and intensity. It's absolutely impossible, especially at his levels of strength. It's a one-way ticket to Snap City. So this is the way he does it, and I think that is quite smart. Now let us look at what he sent me. He sent me an Excel sheet. This is how you know that Paris is a serious guy. Like, usually people send me like Word documents or just like a message on Instagram. He wrote an entire Excel that is very easy to read. So I have it in front of my eyes right now. On day one, his first day of this 5 times a week full body split, he starts with a slow tempo pose leg press. I personally always think that if you have a full body and you don't start with legs, what are you doing? Because this is the most taxing part of the workout. You want to open with the thing that is the most tiring because you're the freshest. You know, if you have watched the video about Erzoviac, that's in the description, that some people don't. And the reason why they don't is because they don't want to prioritize legs. So they sacrifice legs on purpose. But Paris, bold Omni-Man, wants horse legs. So he starts with his slow tempo pose leg press, 8 to 15 reps, perfect rep range, 2 to 3 minutes of rest. Then he does an heel elevated SSB squat. So this is interesting. Why would you start with a leg press and then do a squat? The logic would be that you would pre-fatigue the quads with the leg press that doesn't tire the lower back and the hips, and then you do an SSB. Who would need that? Well, people who are hip dominant. And guess what? Paris has very long legs. We're going to see it in the Physique review. So for him, this makes a shit ton of sense. You know, I personally don't like the notion of pre-fatiguing because to me it's nonsense. Why would you want to pre-fatigue something that you're going to train? In this case, it's more complex and also more simple. There's no pre-fatigue here. What he does instead is he pre-ignites. He knows that he cannot go to failure for his quads on the SSB, so he trains them first so as to stimulate them, not just fatigue them, and then he does something, a compound movement that is going to hit everything at once while the quads are already lit up. 2 to 3 sets, so as you see, less sets, but also more importantly, less reps, 5 to 8, a higher intensity. So far, these are 2 compound movements for the legs, and you're pretty much good. For a full body, you should not be doing more than this. Let's see if he follows that advice. He does neck work afterwards. You can never do too much neck work. Then we move on to a movement for the pecs, the shoulders, and the triceps, a guillotine press. Some people would scream at the sight of the guillotine press because apparently it's dangerous. It's only dangerous if you're an idiot like every single lift. 4 sets of 7 to 12, good rep range. We now see that he starts with big compound movements. Again, if you program a full body, and in reality, if you program any split, this is what I want to see. Then the isolation starts floating in. He has lateral raises, rope press downs, and lying decline triceps extension that can be programmed as isolation for the day. If he did the 3 of them, it would be a ton of volume, and I suspect that he does. And he has a tendency to superset them with what he calls floaters. So a floater could be a leg raise or a GHD sit-up. That is, of course, an isolation for the abs. So if we look at the day in its globality, 3 heavy compound movements, 3 isolation movements, and 1 thing for the abs. If we scan the entire body, is there something missing? Well, on that day, clearly, he did not train biceps. So that's not a full body day. You could tell me, yes, you're correct, because following the name of the split to a T is the easiest way to not get anything done. I see that with people who do push-pull leg as well, and on a pull day, they will only do pull exercises, which shows that the split might not be that good, or that you are making a mistake by following the split to a T. You do not have to train every single body part on a full body. You have to train most of the body. That is the point, and that is what he does. If you look at the muscle strain, this is clearly a quad intensive day with a big focus on the shoulders, the triceps, and that's pretty much that. The chest also gets hit and the abs. So I'm expecting that later on in the week, he is going to make up for that lack of volume for these areas. On day 2, once again, not Tuesday, on day 2, He begins with a super wide pull-up or chest to bar pull-up, and you begin with that movement most likely because it's going to be extremely tiring, it's going to require a lot of focus, so this is a good way to start. 7 to 12 reps, according to me and my preferences, that's a bit high. I always prefer or favor lower rep ranges for this type of movement, but maybe he wants to focus on the quality of the rep and not the intensity, so that is good. Then he does a seated anterior deltoid press. So more focus on the shoulders. You will see that this pays off because he has massive shoulders. He does 3 sets of 12 to 20. That also is a little bit high in my opinion and for my taste. I always would want to stay below 12 reps on something like a compound movement. He also supersets that with neck work. So the neck work is present throughout the program. And the last big compound for the day is going to be a reach start barbell row. 8 to 15, that's a bit high as well, but for barbell row, it might be a good idea so as to not cheat too much. 3 sets. If you look at the way he schedules, it's almost like a menu, meaning that I'm right now reading the program top to bottom. And you could run the program top to bottom. But what you could also do is take the isolations and just sneak them in within the compounds with supersets. That's a possibility. Maybe it's something that he prefers not to do. As far as isolations for the day, you will find things like a dumbbell incline curls, no comments, a lying hamstring curl, and a preacher hammer curl. So things that are going to focus in specific muscles, in particular, the bicep, the forearm, the brachioradialis, and the hamstrings. I think that this is important to mention that just because they are placed at the end of the program does not mean that they are to be skipped. Once again, looking at the day, this is not a full body day because there are a lot of muscles missing, but it's the point. All of the muscles that were not trained on day one are trained here. So you see a big focus on the upper back with the barbell rows and with the pull-ups, a big focus also on the hamstrings with the lying leg curls, and the biceps are hit, which were not hit on day one. So we are good. You do not have to do a 3-hour full body day and then be dead. You could just take that day and split it in 2. Is it technically a full body? No. Who cares? No one does. The goal is just to hit the muscles whenever you can. Then we move on to the day 3. So what is it going to open with? I'm not even looking at the computer. I'm expecting to see an horizontal press. Why? Well, because with the day before, the chest was not hit. So logically, the chest should be hit. Let's see if I'm correct or not. First lift, Campbell bar bench press. Right? Once again, the language of programming does its wonders. 4 sets of 6 to 10, love the rep range, very good movement. He does a leg press as well, so 4 range of motion leg press, 4 sets. He does a 7 to 12, great rep range for that movement as well. You should really push the leg press. Don't do 30 reps like I see some people do. And then more exercises for the chest with a pec fly and an adductor machine. So this is an interesting superset, one that I've never seen. When you think about it, why not? Why not superset your pectorals with an adductor isolation? It's not going to reduce performance. The adductor should be isolated if you want to maximize the size of your legs and also for overall health. Paris is a big proponent of that type of isolation. And then we see a lot of movement that should be supersetted. So we have weighted sit-ups, standing calf raises, long rope press downs, lateral raises, all of this between the 10 to 20, 8 to 12, or 10 to 15 rep ranges, each of which hits a different muscle. What exactly is the point of having a bag of exercises like this just laying around? Well, it's because the method is highly adaptable. So I suppose that he comes in and he thinks, okay, I need to hit chest. There's no way around that. So this is not something I can dodge or I can go around. I need to hit quad, so that also is not going anywhere. But I might very well go in and think, okay, my long head of the tricep is tired, so today I will not be doing seated French presses, but you know what? My shoulders could use some work, so seated lateral raises it is. It could also be that he does all of this. We'll see later that he has a certain morphology, a certain body type that requires a lot of isolation, especially for the limbs. So I'm not surprised to see that the amount of exercises that are specifically for isolating the limbs are much more numerous than the movements that he does for the torso. Now let's look at what day 4 has in store for us. Day 4 is a bit of a fuck up because the only movement and the only compound movement that is present on that day is a leg extension and a band resistance or a pendulum sissy squat. So it's pure leg isolation to develop the quads. And that's it. That's the sole compound of the day. Then what you see is what he calls superset CD, which is just a bunch of isolation stuff. So GM presses, reverse curls, rope press downs, tower pull-ups, all things that are going to give you good stimulus for a certain part of the body, but are going to be low in systemic fatigue, which makes a lot of sense because we're at day 4. So he's more than halfway through the week. This, for many people, would just be a rest day. But Paris has found a way to come in, hit a weakness of his quads, and also get some isolation in without damaging or tampering with his ability to recover. This is something, a skill that you learn the more you progress. Actual full-on rest days are rare, and they should still rare. If you start implementing stuff like arm days, because this is technically an arm day, then you can replace those rest days with more work without actually damaging your ability to be performant elsewhere. And you can still do compounds. I mean, technically, yeah, a close grip bench is a compound. You still get chest. A GM press is a compound. You still get more muscles than just the long head of the tricep. So that's literally free volume. It's right there. And if you look at the progression schemes and the rep ranges, 10 to 20, 8 to 12, none of that is high intensity. All of that is for one go and one go only. Accumulate as much volume as possible. Now let's see how he ends the last day. I'm personally supposed, and again, I'm not checking the computer, I'm supposed to see a lot of compound movements here because it's day 5. You just had an arm day before, so your spine is fresh, your legs are fresh, your everything is fresh. I want to see a day where you fucking kill it. Standing overhead press, RDLs, bent over strict rows. There we are. Good heavy exercises. The posed RDLs in particular. Anyone who does them knows you don't need to do much of them, and they keep you full, as we say, for a very long time, because it's not possible to do heavy RDLs with intensity for 3 to 4 sets several times a week. Unless you're a superhuman. Most people, they can do it once a week, and your hamstrings and glutes are going to be trashed. So he has neck work, but beyond the neck work, the standing overhead press is going to be for the shoulders. The posed RDL, that it's his specialty at this point, I mean, he made the lift very popular, are going to be there. What's the rep range? 5 to 10. What a surprise. You shouldn't go higher than this. Really, you shouldn't. I think that those sets of 20 or 30 on RDLs are a bit of a waste of volume. Just like go medium volume and high intensity, and you will get tremendous results from it. He also does Kelso shrugs in rotation with the bent over strict rows, which are lifts that are apparently amazing for the traps, popularized by Faz Lifts, who might get an installment at some point in this series as well. And he does 8 to 12, which I think are great rep ranges also for the upper back. And then once again, you have this basket of supersets with isolation, with the doctor machine, the lateral raises, the hamstring curl. So what I see from this is someone who is not dogmatic, because he didn't fall for the full body meme of I have to hit every single muscle group or else it's not a full body. Again, who gives a fuck? And 2, lots of flexibility, lots of ability to manipulate the day to hit what needs to be hit. And that's the way I approach bodybuilding too. I come in and I think, okay, what needs to be hit? Right? I don't come in thinking this is biceps. This makes no sense. Maybe I come in and the biceps are tired. So why would I train biceps? No, I want to have the ability to hit every muscle that can be hit at any given time. And this leads us, this verses, into his training philosophy. What can we learn from Omni-Man? What does this training split in particular reveal about his personality? Because keep in mind, the guy is a coach. So maybe he's a shitty coach or maybe he's a great coach. Well, personally, what I found interesting about him when I started watching his content was that I finally had found someone who had a deep understanding of biomechanics, but who did not let it consume his entire being. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's those dudes who dip one toe in the pool of science or exercise science, and suddenly that's all they can talk about, and they lose focus on what's the most important, which is the training hard. Just because you know what lift hits what muscle does not mean you're going to give good advice. You need both the intensity and the brains, and he has both. Omni-Man, he's truly an educated barbarian. He is what every meathead should attempt to become. Someone who's jacked as fuck, trains like a beast, but most importantly is intelligent about the way he approaches things. And if you watch his catalog of videos, that's something that you will find times and times again. He takes complex ideas and concepts about the human body and biomechanics, and he simplifies them. He doesn't dumb them down, he just makes them available for the common man so that you can actually get some fucking gains. And you don't become some Pondexter that just jerks off on a page and reads studies and gets nothing done. Example, the upper chest. How do you eat the upper chest? Well, you have to have a degree of 38 angle, and now your hand has to be like this. Omni-Man comes in and tells you, hey, do an incline press, do something that is going to be aligned with the clavicles, then do some flies. There, your upper chest is going to get huge. That's it. It's as simple as this. So that's the first thing. That's the first takeaway from his philosophy, and this is huge because paralysis from analysis is everywhere nowadays. People panic like, is this rep range good? Is this going to work? I don't know. Give it a try. Try, do things. Doing is everything in this game. You have to get shit done. You have to get the stimulus first and foremost. And when it comes to stimulus, you'll get a lot from Omni-Man because Paris is what I call a big mover. He has this big mover mindset, meaning that he loves to move heavy ass weight. But because he also understands biomechanics, he's not going to be the type of jerk off who's going to tell you, oh yeah, you should do low bar squat because you can lift more weight. Yeah, you can lift more weight because the leverage is advantageous. That's not because the muscles are recruited more. You get more fatigue, you get less stimulus. So for bodybuilding, it's garbage. Paris has a good mix of this big mover mindset and also this intelligence, leading him to usually recommend movements that are going to be the best of both worlds. These reaching RDLs are a good example. The guy can rep 5 plates on the RDLs. A lot of people would let that get to their head and say, oh, I'm so strong, let me do more. He doesn't do that shit. He realized, hey, I'm strong because the bar is close to my shins. What happens if I push the bar away from my shins? Well, now I can lift less weight, but I get more arm strength. So it's a win-win. I get less fatigue, I get more stimulus. This is not relevant for people like me, and maybe not for you because I'm a weakling, and you might be a weakling as well, so we don't have to worry about that. But if you have a good potential for strength, it might become an issue at some point because you might run into a recovery problem. Thinking like this with biomechanics on one hand of the brain and a proper love of big movement and a big movement mindset on the other hand of the brain mixed together is truly something beautiful, which also means that someone like him is not going to shun isolation. A lot of people who are in love with compounds compare compounds to isolation and say, well, I can lift more weights on compounds, therefore compounds are better. I know it sounds stupid, but a ton of people think like this. Paris is also a big proponent of isolation because he understands that, yeah, you might only be able to move 90 pounds on the bicep curls, but it's because the bicep is a smaller muscle. So it's going to still give you a shit ton of stimulus and you're going to end up with massive arms. That is the point of bodybuilding. And you see that in the way he programs. You saw that he prioritizes compounds, but he never falls into the trap of neglecting the isolation. The isolations are always there, which is going to lead, if more people follow his methods, to more balanced physiques. The spider physique is going to be eradicated once and for all because instead of training for strength and size, people will be training for general strength and size, which ultimately means training for size because that's just bodybuilding. If you try to get as strong as possible on every single movement that targets every single muscle of the body with the proper stimulus in the proper form, guess what? That's bodybuilding. That's what we all do. That's what we've always done. And, I always shit on powerlifters because they give hypertrophy advice and their advices are shit. You've never heard me bitch about Paris. One, because I think he can beat me up. Two, also because he's not dogmatic at all. And that's so refreshing. You never hear him say, oh, this is the best, and if you do that, you're an idiot. No, he always tries to explain to you what is good, what is bad, based on objective rationales, which also leads him to tell you, hey, I can teach you stuff, but ultimately it's up to you to find what works for you. And this is at the core of everything. This is what we all should be doing. Try to find what works for us. Look at his method. His method is not, I train like this, you train like this too. It's, I train like this, here are the principles I follow, try to follow them as well and see what you can come up with. Most likely your own Berserk method is going to be entirely different to his. The backbone will still be there, but the actual creature, the statue it will create, your body, will be entirely different. The only point that I wrote here where he fell on this is that the entire Larsen press thing sort of ran out of his own hands. It's his own Frankenstein creature. He focuses so much on telling people to think with their brains about lifts and not to be emotionally attached and like to use biomechanics and proper reasonings. And then people are like, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to do Larson press instead. It's just the way people are, right? We are emotional creatures first and foremost. He cannot blame himself for that. I think personally that it's quite funny. Now, another aspect I wanted to mention is his approach to diet. Paris has been on a big crusade to get people to bulk. And that also is the type of things that I usually point out and say, hey, that's not a good idea because this obsession with like eating big to getting big just get people fat. Once again, I never actually had to say anything about his methods because he approaches it in a tasteful way. Let me explain what I mean by this. He doesn't tell you to eat to get bigger and just to gain weight for the sake of gaining weight, like I see so many people doing. He tells you to eat to feed your progression in the gym. And that makes all of the difference in the world because instead of getting fat, you're going to gain muscle. There is a massive difference between eating to be in a caloric surplus, which is what he promotes, and eating to gain weight. And you could tell me, well, the caloric surplus provokes the weight gain, so it's the same. Well, no, because the weight that you gain is going to be either fat or muscle, and that is going to be determined by one thing and one thing only, and that is what you do in the gym. You eat more on a bulk to be in a caloric surplus, to be able to lift more weight, to do more volume, and to do more sets. That is the point. If that doesn't happen on your bulk and you gain weight, guess what? You are simply getting fatter. Paris, times and times again, tells you to regulate your gains by focusing on lean mass gain by looking at progression in the gym. And that naturally also slows your weight gains. So some people get upset at this, but you should not be upset. It's always better to gain, I don't know, like 20 pounds within the span of 3 years rather than 20 pounds within 1 year, because you will find that within these 3 years, your lifts are going to go way up and what you will have gained is muscle. So you won't have to lose the fat and you won't have to do all of these yo-yo diets where you gain the weight and you lose the weight because you're constantly gaining and losing the same 10 pounds. Paris has done exactly what I have done before I fucked up, which is a slow bulk. Perma bulkers always succeed, only if they bulk slowly. That is truly the key to eternal gains and the key to shattering the natural limit. Now, I think this is especially relevant in this case because keep in mind that Paris used to be obese. So we have someone who used to be obese and now looks like a beast, who fixed his diet, fixed his metabolism, and pushed away all of these crazy surpluses to go back into a more balanced approach to life. And that naturally is reflected in his physique. So now we're going to move on to the critique. This one is going to be an interesting one because Paris has got what I call an atypical body. If you look at his proportions, he has very long legs and he has a very short torso. In French, we call that un longiligne. Oftentimes, you see people of African descent having that body type with the long legs. It's what I call the JoJo aesthetics. You know, if you watch a JoJo Bizarre Adventure, every single male character is longiligne. They all have the same body type. They have those long ass legs and those short torsos. So it makes them look very elegant, mucho eleganto, as they say in Mexico. So that usually leads to a more developed upper body. But naturally, it also comes with a downside. And the natural downside is that because your legs are so long, it's very tough to get them big. Because now not only do you have more real estate, but you're also not going to be very good at squatting because your hips are naturally going to want to shoot out, so your quads are going to be recruited less. And now you better understand why Paris trains his legs the way he does. If you look at his squat form, his hips shoot up. And I'm certain that some people would say, well, isn't that bad form? Yeah, I guess, but it's also the way he's built. What do you want him to do? Like cut his legs down so that he gets shorter? You cannot fight against the way your body is built. Your hips are going to be higher than most people because your legs are longer. So you have to find ways around it. But that's not all, because Paris is special. You see, usually people who are longiligne tend to have shorter limbs. But in his case, he also has longer arms. So he has long arms and long legs. I guarantee you that if I took his body and I gave it to a random noob, that person would be complaining about having bad genetics. And yet, I know for a fact that many people believe Paris to be on drugs. This really shows to you the power of training. The body that you're given at birth is nothing. It doesn't fucking matter. What matters is what you do with it. So let's see how jacked bald Omni-Man managed to get with quote-unquote subpar aesthetic genetics. First, his biceps. I gave him an A for biceps. They are big as fuck, very bulbous. The insertion is not the best, so the potential for size is not super high. I mean, he can still grow on there, but he's very close to getting an S at this point. I think where the real evolution is going to occur is the triceps. I gave him a B for triceps, even though he has really, really good tricep insertions. And that is why. It's because his arms are so long that I guarantee you that his triceps can blow up in size even more than they are right now. His strength on extensions in particular are going to shock people when he gets to his prime. It's going to be insane. And it's the same for the forearms. He has long forearms and the insertions are actually quite good as well. So there's insane potential. So I give him a B for forearms and triceps for that reason in particular, is because I know for a fact he's going to get much higher than that. You know, we discuss a 20-inch arm naturally. He jokes around about it. I believe that he can do it. I believe that he has the insertions and the potential to do it. And how is he going to get there? Is it going to be through compounds? I mean, some of it is going to be compounds, but the majority is going to come from isolation. How did someone with such long arms manage to get such big biceps and triceps? Well, he isolates hard. It's not enough to just do isolation. You have to push them like a motherfucker. And once again, this is when this big mover mindset comes into play. Now let's look at the chest, shoulders, and traps. The ranking and the grades are going to be quite easy. It's triple S, SSS. Chest S, he has a massive bulging chest, great upper chest as well. Shoulders S, 3D delts. You can have 3D delts if you want. Shut up. Look at his delts. Okay? Look at the delts of Alex Leonidas. Look at the delts of so many natural lifters. Yes, you can have capped delts if you're a natural. You won't have the insane, like, pumped with hair look that all of these dudes on trend get, but who wants to look like that anyways when you can look like a superhero while having to die in your 30s? And if you think about it for 1 second again, usually you have a big chest, the shoulders are going to suffer because the chest is going to store the work, which in this case is not true at all. Which is doubly incredible when you consider that Paris has a big focus on horizontal presses and vertical presses take sort of a step down in his program. So what happened exactly here? Well, I'll tell you what happened. He has long arms, which means that he has to do more range of motion. Many people complain about that and say, oh, that's why I'm weak on bench. Just for indication, he benches 4 plates. And he benches around 3 plates for reps, like for sets of 8 to 10. So again, you have no excuse whatsoever. But the thing that's interesting here is, once again, biomechanics. What happens when you have long arms? You have to travel more. So the chest is more stretched, the shoulders are more stretched, so they grow. Meaning that his body type allows him to get massive shoulders with bench alone. Someone like me would not be able to do that because my arms are much shorter than his. So for people like me, vertical pressing is optimal. For someone like him, he can make do with just bench variations. Then the traps are also S. And that's explained by the fact that he pulls from the floor all the time. When you pull from the floor, you get the passive stretch, you get big traps. He also loves to do upright rows, so that explains that. That is also trap isolation. It's also a tremendous shoulder builder. It's interesting how every time I do one of these physique reviews, we can always link what the person loves to do and is good at and strong at with what their best body part at. Almost as if there was a direct correlation between the way you lift and the way you look. See someone like Bold Omni-Man takes genetics and uses that as a weapon and a tool to program his split properly and do the proper movements to get big. Whiners look at our genetics as an excuse to not get shit done. That is the big difference. Now, as for the neck, it's also S tier, and you see why. It's because he isolates it all the time into his program. Now, I would warn him to be careful with this, not because of the sleep apnea, but because I believe that at some point he's not going to be allowed on airplanes anymore. Like, the flight attendants are going to take one look at his neck and say, okay, you're a flight risk. We don't know what type of bullshit you're going to pull. You most likely have a sword in your backpack. You're going to have to take the bus today, sir. But that's going to be okay because he has also S tier lats. So I guess he can just fly to his next destination. And that's caused directly by his love for pull-ups. Bold Omni-Man is also a big proponent of pull-ups, telling people, hey, you want big lats? Stop all of this bullshit of like reach around, lat pull down that I see with like 20 pounds. Do heavy pull-ups, weighted chin-ups, weighted neutral ups, and you're going to get big lats. And isn't that interesting that now we've had 3 lifters, Alex, Erzo, and Paris, who all have demon backs, who all swear by pull-ups. It's almost as if all of these 160-pound dudes on Instagram who tell you that pull-ups are not optimal and biomechanically speaking, they don't actually work the lats. It's almost as if these people actually knew nothing about lifting. Interesting how that works. Now, what about the rhomboids? The rhomboids are also pretty good because he does a shit ton of rows and he's extremely strong on pulls as well. The one weak point in the entire chain, I believe, are the erectors and the glutes. I only gave them a B, and that's mostly due to the way he's built. Because his torso is so short, there's not much space for these muscles to express themselves fully. But that weakness also leads to a pretty sick Christmas tree because he has like a bulging lower back and a very good V-taper. So it's sort of the weakness of his strength, if you will. And talking about strength, the abs are also really developed. For someone who is 6 feet and 200 pounds, he has a full six-pack visible at all times. He doesn't need to actually flex it. And I hate to repeat myself because I sound like a broken record, but the reason is quite obvious. Look at his program. He isolates his abs almost every single day. He goes heavy. He progressively overloads. There's no mystery in bodybuilding. You train a muscle properly, it's going to grow. So I'm giving him an A for abs, not an S because his obliques and serratus can still use some work. But if he starts to isolate them with pullovers and with like suitcase deadlifts, his core is going to become monstrous. Now let's look at the legs, because the legs are supposed to be weak. We're talking about someone that is supposed to have a monster upper body, but weak as shit legs. For quads, I gave him a B. That is a very low grade when we take into account that he has 28 inches legs. But because they're so long, that 28 inch looks like a 25 or 26 on someone with quote unquote normal proportions. So once again, his potential for legs is insane and he's found a way to work around his limitations. So I'm certain that the grade is going to go up as well. The arm strings are an A because people who are built like him tend to be extremely good at pulling weight from the floor, which naturally trains the hamstring as well. Look at the amount of weight he can deadlift, look at the amount of weight he can RDL. There is no mystery here either. And then for the calves, a C. I'm going to keep giving people C's until we collectively start hitting them properly. I know that recently there was sort of like a synchronistic event where we all collectively realized that we train calves like pussies, and that's why we all have small calves. So I'm looking forward to the day where we all have at least B or A tier calves. And that's going to be it for this video. So I hope that you enjoyed this lifter profile episode about bold Omni-Man. I already have an idea for the next installment. It's going to be someone that I personally believe to be natural, but that everyone else apparently thinks is a steroid user. So that's going to be quite controversial as well. And I also have a brand new program that is going to be dropping on Thursday, one that I know lots of you guys are going to love because it's going to contain many aspects that you have been asking for a very long time. So I'll be seeing you there. Thank you for watching and have a good day.